a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
You might have heard us talking about a very special Vision tour that is marked on the calendar for next year, 2025. It's a tour to the United States, featuring a visit to the world-renowned Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum. Well, the Ark is a life-size scale model of the biblical Noah's Ark. And the Answers in Genesis Vision Tour next year will include both the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum that were founded by Aussie creationist Ken Ham. Hannah Moriarty is back with us today from Answers in Genesis Australia. Hey, Hannah, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Neil. Wonderful to be here.
Hannah, the USA Genesis Creation Vision Tour sounds like a mouthful, but it's a tour to the US that takes in these amazing, iconic things that people can see to do with creation.
Absolutely. I think it's 20 days of action-packed sort of trekking across America, seeing some pretty phenomenal and gospel sites, which will be really encouraging to people. But as you mentioned, Neil, Answers in Genesis have the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum located in Kentucky, and there will be some significant time spent at those attractions for the tour group. And,
you know, just arriving in Kentucky, and I know you've been to the Ark Encounter and you've been to the Creation Museum. You're there arriving like in the middle of the country, and there's like three states you could go turn left.
All converging.
Yep. So then you're off to the Ark Encounter and you drive up over the rise, and there it does appear on your right-hand side, and the biblical scale version of the Noah's Ark. It's a pretty impressive sight, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think the word is epic. That's probably the one word I can think that sums it up. Just as you said, as you drive over that rise and you see this ark that you've read about for, in my case, most of my life in the scriptures and in books, and to see it there is just phenomenal. So it's 155 meters long, and I believe it's the world's largest freestanding timber structure, Neil. So it's put itself on the map for that reason, but there's something as Christians that we know is much more significant about seeing the Ark and its significance to the Scriptures.
And of course, you went over and you no doubt had a special tour with Ken Ham himself, and he would have given you the red carpet treatment, and part of the team, the Australian team. It would have been just an amazing opportunity. I had that opportunity too when I visited the Ark Encounter, and even have some photos, Ken and I, in some of the out-of-bounds areas. You know, where we're up in the top section. Ken says, hey, come on over here. You're not allowed normally, but we're going to get a photo.
Yes.
So those sorts of things, there are some amazing things to be a part of. Gives you some context of the scale of Noah's Ark.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal. I think walking through, there's 4 decks, but as you say, only 3 of them are open to the public. And if you happen to have a VIP friend, you might be able to get to the 4th deck. But the 3 decks that are open to the public are just so beautifully kitted out. You walk into the Ark, and every single part of the displays throughout the Ark on each deck is quite immersive. So the first deck you walk through and you see model animals. You're seeing even models very realistic of Noah and his family who are feeding the animals or doing different work around that deck. And so you truly feel like you're walking through this biblical sort of experience. And then as you go up to the next level and the next level, there's more in-depth information, I guess, about the historical and the scientific aspects of the scripture. And I would say that something that struck me was just the quality of everything, Neil. The Americans do things well generally, but the quality throughout the Ark and even the Creation Museum itself was so striking to see just how realistic things were, how thorough but aesthetically presented limited all of the information was, and there were crowds of people. And I hear that's the case on any day of the week. There's thousands and thousands of people that walk through these attractions.
Not sure if you had this experience, but walking through the Ark Encounter and off at the Creation Museum, and you're with Ken Ham in person, there were people who would come up and say, "Are you Ken Ham?" And there was one lady, I remember, she was in tears, just knowing the impact that Ken's ministry over many years now with Answers in Genesis has had on her and had on her family. So let's talk about the Creation Museum, because it started being the Creation Museum and the Ark was added on to that, and the Creation Museum is a major museum.
Absolutely. Yeah, you walk in and again, it's this epic sort of structure that you step into, and the walls look like there's stone and there's fountains and ponds inside, and dinosaur bones and real looking dinosaurs. Just it's fully immersive again. I don't know if the planetarium was there when you were there, Neil.
It was.
The 3D studio as well. So all these really wonderful experiences, and of course there's many different facets of the Creation Museum. You can walk through and see different displays, which are all very informative, and you could spend an entire day really in each section just absorbing the incredible information that's displayed there.
Hannah, give us a little update here, because lots of listeners so familiar with Ken Ham, and they'll know that Ken recently passed on the baton to a new leadership, and another so well-known Australian name, Martin Isles.
Yes.
He's very much a part of this, and no doubt when we're talking about an Aussie tour to the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum, Martin is going to be part of that too.
That's right. I always think it's quite funny. There's two Aussies over there in America who are just having such an impact, not just in America, but globally. I know when you walk through, and you would have found this as well, Neil, that there are people really from all over the world as you walk through those attractions, which is just phenomenal. I mean, you know Ken Ham personally, and I know that you know Martin as well. But Ken is certainly someone who has lived boldly, and it's clear that God has just orchestrated a space, and Ken has invited Martin to sort of step into that executive CEO role there for Answers in Genesis. So it's been exciting to see that synergy. Both Ken and Martin are great men of faith. They certainly live boldly. They go against the grain of culture and cultural progressivism, and they're boldly proclaiming the gospel. And you know, it's not popular to share a literal view of Genesis. And of course, Martin is very gifted to apply scripture, and particularly the blueprints that we find in Genesis, to cultural issues that we're all facing today. And so God's really gifted him to do that. And it's lovely to see how that wonderful ministry work that Ken has done in over his life just really nicely fits with where Martin is coming from as well.
You know, the Ark Encounter is now one of the globally renowned icons of Christian symbolism. You know, when you try and think of what symbols there are of Christianity around the world, I'm thinking of, Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro in South America. But of course, the Ark Encounter has become so significant, and it's been a thorn in the flesh for some people who just don't like the biblical account of Genesis. But it is now a renowned icon all over the world, and it's growing in popularity every year.
Absolutely. I think that's the amazing thing. It's renowned amongst Christians, whether you agree with a young earth or not, but also non-Christians. When I'm asked where I work, I'll often say Answers in Genesis. And if that doesn't garner recognition, I normally revert to saying, do you know the guy who built the ark, the life-size ark? And you always see a light bulb moment and people go, I've heard of that. I've seen that. Wow. So I love sharing that story with people. And you're right. It's something that God has used in many ways, just even when I was there. And if you speak to Ken or Martin, they will share, they can have up to 10,000 people a day walk through those attractions. And those attractions, you can't walk walk through and not be moved by the inerrancy of Scripture, when you see the Scriptures laid out with so much historical and scientific backing. And I also think just the presence of God, where we're fully immersed and interacting with His Scriptures, we can't help but be changed and impacted by that. So I am certain that people come to know Christ and have their faith strengthened daily through those experiences. And it's just exciting to see. And I know those numbers have not dwindled, but they seem to be getting stronger as the years go on.
Well, it's so exciting to know, and I call Ken Ham and Martin Iles two of our favourite sons as Australians, and to know that they are really making an impact around the world because of this ministry is very powerful. Now, this opportunity for listeners to our conversation today to actually go on a tour to the US and take in the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum, is there a date that's set up, Hannah? It's early next year, as I understand it. Do we know any dates?
Well, actually, it's about this time next year. So I believe it's happening from the 3rd to the 23rd of October. So those are the 20 days where it will be happening next year. And I believe to find out more information, you just need to head to vision.org.au/tours.
So, yes, you can register on the Vision website to get more information about that tour. I'm glad you've set me right there. So it's about this time next year.
That's
so
right.
We're a year in planning, and sometimes when you're planning your overseas holiday, you do want to plan in advance. And no doubt there'll be some other attractions that people will get to see too when they're on that tour. But this is the Answers in Genesis Vision Tour. It is on next year. And simply go to the Vision website, vision.org.au, to be able to register your interest to be able to go along. I guess you'll have to inquire about pricing and things like that. I'm sure that's not all yet set in stone. I'm sure there's a travel agency that's looking after all of those things, but vision.org.au. And no doubt there'll be a link too on the Answers in Genesis website at answersingenesis.com.au. Hannah Moriarty is back with us, and she is with Answers in Genesis Australia. Hannah, thanks so much for another great update today on 2020.
Thanks so much, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.